Ladies and gentlemen, careful now, it's watch repair time. Today we'll be seeing this, him, and this. Let's go. First of all, good morning. Secondly, I trust you are having an excellent day and everyone is being absolutely marvelous. On the bench today, we have an answer to a question. Can a $10 watch be any good? I bought this watch for that amount, and today we'll see what we've got for our money. I'm going to get on with servicing this watch now, and while I do that, we can have a chat about this watch brand and this particular watch. Ultimately, we'll see if it's any good. You could skip to the end now and find out, but if you do, you'll miss out on the emotional roller coaster ride this watch caused me to experience. We'll kick off as usual. Out the case, hands and dial off. This watch is branded as Corvette. If I wasn't the great guy that I am, I'd be making jokes about this watch not being able to go around corners, but I won't. I'm better than that. We always remove the balance to avoid damaging the hairspring or pivots while doing the rest of the work. The date mechanism on this watch is very simple with no quick set. There's very little information online about Corvette watches apart from some speculation that this may be a French brand. Luckily, the ever-reliable book by Kathleen H. Pritchard, Swiss Timepieces 1775 to 1975, has some answers. Corvette is one of the many brand names used by the Swiss watch manufacturer Avia. How many you ask? Grab a pen and paper and get ready. Here are some of the brands Avia applied to their watches: Anglia, Anthos, Aria, Avalast, Avia, King, Aviation, Asia, Bentley spelled L-Y, Beetle, Calandrita, Camos, and Sensor, Chabep, Citadel, Citation, Clavos, Clockok, and Coda. Wait, where the bloody hell did that go? I barely touched it. Let's look again. Gadzooks. And in slow motion. I'm in an absolute rage, and so should you be. That's so unfair. There it is. That's amazing. Normally they'd ping off into the dark dimensions. We'll leave it off for now and put it back on after cleaning. Anyway, where were we? The brands used by Avia watches. There was also Collina, Copra, Croisade, Dalila, Dicto, Elicinda, Empress, Factor, Filano, Garra, Ita, Latin, Me, and Medical Sport, Ragtime Watch, Robio and Rondo, Stifa, Striga, The Boulevard, Thermostatal, Tipsy, Top Hole, and as we know already, Corvette. I think the head of Avia marketing needed to calm down a bit. The takeaway is, if you see a watch with any of those brand names you just wrote down, you're getting an Avia. Don't worry if the disassembly feels like it's rushing by. We'll focus more on this watch movement when we put it back together. So now we know that this $10 watch is actually made by Avia. What about the movement? The one in this watch was manufactured by Lorsa. It's a Lorsa P75. Lorsa was founded in 1924 by Marc Favre in Tramelan, Switzerland, and produced mid-range movements for the cheaper end of the quality watch market. A perfect fit for Avia watches. So to answer the first part of the question, what can you get for 10 bucks? Or in my case, £8.50, you get a mid-range Swiss-made watch with a perfectly acceptable movement, which is pretty amazing value. Unfortunately, we've all lived so long a pint of beer in a London pub now costs more than I paid for this watch. The next video on this channel is going to be something a bit special. Unfortunately, I'm not legally allowed to talk about it yet. Subscribe so you can be the first to find out about it, and also provide me with an infinitesimally small amount of personal validation. Everything has been cleaned and inspected. No issues found. We can get this back together now. I am going to replace the cracked crystal, though. That adds about 30p to the cost. YouTube stars like me love showing the mainspring winder, but here's the thing, we only show when it goes well. It's nearly always a better idea to spend the £10 and replace the mainspring. The end of the spring is folded over into a little hook. Got to get it into the winder without snapping it off. Reverse wind to unhook the arbor. Now remove the arbor without causing the spring to explode out of the winder and whip out an eye, or worse. Despite my disparagement of mainspring winders, plonking the spring into the barrel is always satisfying. But it's followed by the next job, fitting the barrel arbor, that can be a bit of a nightmare. In this case, it went straight in. Thank you, watchmaking gods. Now the lid with this clever little tool. And the important check that the lid hasn't been squashed down too hard, trapping the arbor. That's the dichotomy of watchmaking. We want to get everything into place as precisely as possible, to within 1/100th of a millimeter. But at the same time, the parts need to be free to move with as little friction as possible. We'll get this center wheel in first. It has its own little bridge. The minute hand sits on the end of this wheel, and it's driven directly by the next thing to go in, the mainspring barrel. Now we'll put the rest of the gear train in place, starting with the escape wheel. Third wheel goes in next. It gets driven by the center wheel, the one with the minute hand on it. The third wheel's job is to speed things up for the next wheel. This is the fourth wheel. The pivot is long because it goes all the way through to the watch face, where we stick the second hand on the end. The fourth wheel is driven by the third wheel and passes on power to the escape wheel. As ever, check everything is moving as it should be before screwing down the bridge. A little lubrication where the barrel arbor touches the barrel bridge. The barrel bridge drops on nice and easily. More lubrication for the crown wheel and ratchet wheel. No, the crown wheel. Don't forget to remember which of these screws has the reverse thread. We can gently persuade the pallet fork into its jewel. When it looks like it's there, gently again with the pallet bridge, checking the delicate pivots are in position before screwing down. The pallet fork locks the movement, so we can now wind the barrel to add some power. Tiny amounts of special pallet jewel grease onto the pallet jewels. It costs about $90,000 a gallon. Try not to spill any. We'll work the pallet fork back and forth to smear the lubrication onto each of the 15 escape wheel teeth. It's a good idea to plonk the balance wheel in now and see how things are going. There may be an issue with the work done so far. Best to find out now. We can take the opportunity to add some oil to the gear train. That was a bit too much on that first one. We can turn the watch over and get on with the rest of the assembly. In preparation for the keyless and motion works, we'll put a few drops of oil on the pivots and whatnot. Sliding pinion first, then the clutch. With them in place, we can insert the winding stem. A universal point of awfulness on all watches that have it is the setting lever screw. This movement doesn't have one. It uses the button type. And for that, I tip my hat to the movement designer. As you know, watchmaking has a plethora of arcane jargon, impenetrable to the normal lady or gentleman. For example, the way I have fitted this yoke would be described by a watchmaker as the wrong bloody way round. Not a problem though, I'll just turn it over and sort it out in the editor. We'll employ a watchmaker's special stick to try and rein in the yoke spring's natural inclination to disappear. They're even finding yoke springs in the ice at the South Pole, apparently. This intermediate wheel transfers the winding stem rotation to the watch hands when the crown is pulled out to the hand setting position. The date jumper's job is to make the date click over at midnight. On some high-end watches, this happens instantaneously within seconds of midnight. On this watch, it's over the course of an hour. This spring is a bit fiddly. Time to get the big guns out. Not just special watchmaker's stick, but special watchmaker's stick with a bit of Rodico stuck on the end. With the watches back together, I like to take some time to look at it running. Not just to check it looks okay, but a moment to marvel at the ingenuity and skill involved in the creation of every movement. The gear train has two jobs. First is to provide motion to the watch hands, and secondly to supply an appropriate amount of power to the balance wheel. The escape wheel teeth smack into the pallet fork jewels, passing that energy onto the balance wheel that keeps time by oscillating back and forth. It's this conversation of momentum between the balance wheel and escape wheel that allows the power of the mainspring to be served to the watch hands in discrete packets of energy we call ticks. Let's slow down the video a little to get a better view. Englishman Thomas Mudge invented this system in 1755. It's still found in nearly every mechanical wristwatch made today. Physicists contend that time, something that appears to be key to the universe, doesn't actually exist as we understand it and is nothing more than an emergent property of other fundamental processes. They've clearly never waited for a pizza to be delivered. That's enough, yeah. Shall we get this thing on the time grapher and see how we did? There we have it. Our $10 watch running to within a second a day. What a result. But hang on, I'm going to do something that will probably get me thrown out of YouTube watchmaking club. We're putting the watch into a vertical position. Unless you're one of those people who spends their days with an arm out in front of them maintaining a perfect dial-up position, we really need to see what happens here. Okay, a variance of 16 seconds or so. That's not bad. If you'd like to see a follow-on video where we take a deeper dive into positional variance and try and improve this watch, let me know. That's it. Goodbye until next time. Have a marvelous day.